we are going to be talking all things clients and instructors again, and this is part 2 of our 4-part series. So yeah, I'm looking forward to where this chat is going to take us, Mila. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to continue our discussions. Looking back at our last week, I really enjoyed what we covered and just the ability to be able to, not just share opinions, but experiences, the good and the bad. And I feel like that's such a great way to not just showcase knowledge, but help someone else learn something, because we always learn by doing, but sometimes you can learn by someone else's doing as well, which can be very beneficial.
Someone else's
so I'm really
trial and
excited to
error.
carry on this conversation, and I think we have some interesting topics that we're going to cover today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I really look forward to it. I think it's also so good to hear your experience and your journey, and we all come from very different backgrounds, yet we have a common goal to help people as much as we can. And whether we're helping instructors or we're helping clients, we're still helping people, which is just, that lights me up. So yeah. So today we've got a few topics that we'll be talking about. Where I think is a really good place to start would be telling versus feeling. And with regards to when you're getting someone moving, are you telling them where they need to be feeling it? Where is that boundary of how much to tell them versus allowing your client to explore where it is that they're feeling that, and then playing around with it? Because I often find that if I was to tell clients where they need to feel everything, they're just going through the motions, and so many times they're not really present in their body. But the second I say, so where did you feel it? They're like, I'm going to have to do it again. So really training them in a way that they know they need to still stay present in the workout. There's that fine balance, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I feel, because it depends on the client in front of you, but sometimes you'll have a client that's there to connect into their own body, and other times you'll have someone like, where should I be feeling this?
Yeah.
Oh, is this wrong? Should I be feeling it somewhere else? Did I do it incorrectly? Or maybe, and they get into this spiral of like, maybe they're doing something wrong if they're not feeling where you're saying they should feel it. And this is something that I also experienced when I was first starting out, right? Because you kind of learn an exercise, you kind of learn what's the muscle group that you're focusing on. So you cue someone into it, or at least I used to think of cueing someone more towards like, feel this here. But with time, I realized that you will feel where your body needs to feel it. And an example that I can give, I mean, even in something like the 100 in the Pilates world, right? We're like core, but someone might feel it in the neck. And I have a lot of clients that feel it in the neck, or hip flexors and quads. And so like, I've had these experiences where they're like, oh, I must be doing something wrong. And for me, with time, it's like, no, actually, that's a really great indication, even for the rest of the class, or something that we're learning about your body. We need to strengthen the neck a bit more because your alignment is fine. Your neck is in a safe position. So we just need to build strength, or the same with the quads. So exactly going back to what you said, telling someone where they should feel it versus them connecting into their body, and almost like it being an interactive session where you can learn from them and they can learn about themselves with an exercise, can be so much more effective than saying, oh no, you're feeling it in your quads, bend your legs back to tabletop, let's drill in the core. And for me, it'll be like, okay, well, fine, we can regress and exercise if it's a bit too hard, but just because you're feeling it in your quads, perfectly fine. Your quads are working to extend your knees. They should be on fire, you know, if they are not as strong as the core, or if
Mm.
the core is just really, really nice and strong, absolutely fine that the tension or all the pressure is not in your abs. So I do like the concept of yes, being able to, you know, direct someone into what are the dominant muscle groups during an exercise if the client wants it, because some clients do, they want to be like, is this okay? Should I be feeling this here? But you also want to get them to a point where they can say, oh, you know what? Actually, I felt this here, or I felt this in a completely different place. It's not wrong, but I want you to be aware of it. Like, let's look at that
Mm.
next, you know?
Yeah, it does certainly allow you to map how the client is moving and maybe what needs that extra attention, as you mentioned, and what isn't quite connecting as well. And having taught top athletes, uh, some of those clients have the most questions because they want to be on top form and they are so used to just getting everything perfect. And when they start out new, they want to know why, they want to know how, they want to know what they need to ignite. And it's trying to help them with a new sense of training and just allowing them a new type of workout instead of
Yeah.
everything being explained. But sometimes also clients that have fear with movement is a big one, because if they're fearful, they are going to be asking many questions just in case they're going to
Mhm.
be feeling it in that area, and they just want to be sure that it's right. And there's that balance again where if you're not saying enough, that client's not going to feel safe. So it's allowing and really understanding your client and looking at it from their perspective. If they're fearful, what are they fearful of? And
Mhm.
how can you create a safer environment for them to be able to explore movement without the constriction and fear of feeling pain?
That's a really interesting and something comes to mind as you were speaking. How do you address the clients that are really there on top of every movement when you want them to come out of that mentality of I should be doing it like this or it's wrong? And how do you bring them back into the feeling state? And I ask this because I feel like it's so simple, but I've had moments where, you know, a client will be like, I don't know, like, wait, and we'll repeat an exercise sometimes just for them to understand. And I can see they're working hard, but they've been told maybe by previous trainers so often of where they should feel that they focus on that versus, and then, you know, finding that connection back to, but what are they really feeling? So
Mm,
have you had such a case scenario, and how do you, like, that transition can't be cold turkey because you can't be on every exercise. What do you feel? What do you feel?
yeah.
Like, you also don't want, it's not an exam for the person. You want them to enjoy, you want to give
Yes.
them a little bit, you want to ask a little bit. So how for you or for yourself and your clients do you find that balance?
Yeah, I love that question. We were actually going to be going through this, and it's one of the points that comes to mind is um, meeting the client where they're at. So if this client is asking many questions, start by answering the questions, or
Mhm.
before giving the next exercise, explain a few points so they know something that they need to look for. and slowly but surely introduce a little exercise here and there after doing 2 or 3 with the explanations. You could either do the same exercise and go, okay, let's explore how that feels on the other side of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that after doing a few other exercises, doing a new exercise, going, okay, this one, let's play a little bit and let's feel where your body goes without
Mm-hmm.
questioning too much. And let's just play around with feeling a little bit. So it's giving them what they want, but just slowly introducing a different method. And you'll then find by the second or third session, they will have gotten used to a new way, and they'll always give them 1 or 2 exercises, or more if needed. Just read your client, but always give them something where you are explaining or you're answering the questions, but then just try and guide them and lead them into a way of feeling versus talking.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I also do as well. You do something on one side and then you ask them to feel on the other. And I find for me at least that works quite well, because they not only have to pay attention, but they also have to try and remember how things felt. So they're really like, when I tell someone, okay, you know, with unilateral movements, when I will ask them, do this exercise, I'll explain, I'll talk them through it. If they're the kind of client that really needs quite a lot of guidance, which isn't great, especially for somebody who's, you know, recovering from an injury. It's normal to give a lot of guidance so that they feel safe. And then I'll say, okay, and we're going to do the same exercise on the other side. So just do a few more reps here. See how your body feels, and then I want you to tell me after you do the other side what it was like for you there. That has been quite interesting, because I'll often see someone, just when I tell them we're going to switch sides and do it, and I'm going to ask them to explain. Very often I have clients who will like close their eyes and really try to focus on the exercise. And so the detail that I see them give in that exercise, it's what I'm aiming for throughout my session.
Yeah.
But if you're always telling and you're never asking them to feel, that connection might never be reached. So I find that really interesting. One of the other things that comes to my mind is, you know, even something like leg circles. Okay, leg circles is an easy one, but frog, at least in the start repertoire, it's called frog. One of the exercises, you do it one way, and then you have to do it the other way. So this is how the legs work. And sometimes clients will get confused on the reverse. So, and that's a great indication also for you to know how connected they are into their body. So I can say something like, okay, 2 more reps, and then you're going to reverse the exercise. And then when they reverse, sometimes I watch a client, they're waiting for me to tell them how to reverse, and I'll be like, I'm just waiting to see how you have connected into the exercise, and I'll help you. But let's just give it a try yourself. And that can be interesting, because even though they've just done the exercise, maybe the mind was somewhere else. Maybe they were too focused on what I was saying versus how they were feeling during the movement, or just the choreography of mind, body, breath. That when it all comes into reverse, I've had, not always, but often, a client be like, I can't believe how difficult this is. And so once I guide them through, they'll be like, oh yeah, of course, you know. And it can be an interesting way, because the next time we do something, I'll be like, okay, we're going to do 2 more reps, and then we're going to reverse, or we're going to do the other side. And right away they're like, okay, no, I got this.
Yes,
And
exactly.
those moments they can be quite fun in a session, but they can be really beneficial. Because it is often in those moments where I will find someone, or I can see someone connecting into their body with
Yes.
so much detail that I could never cue them into.
I love that. It is so true. It brings that, it brings such an amazing feeling of presence in their body
Yes.
that they may never have felt before. And I also feel like what that helps with is trust in themselves and their body's ability, because so often clients will come in and expect you to do it for them, but then
Right.
or tell them everything, and then when they left either in a group situation doing their own thing, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Or the second you walk away and allow them to explore, they just don't do anything. So by
Yeah.
using that method so beautifully that you were talking about, that would allow them that confidence in their body, that trust, and
Yeah.
also learning that play is okay when having a workout.
You know, this actually makes me think of something that I still see, especially with new clients, is this concept of right versus
Yes.
wrong. And this is where I try a lot to like connect the person into their body, because the concept of right movement versus wrong is very bizarre, because right for who? You know, that's
Yes.
my big thing when I try to talk to my clients. This exercise is good for who? For what? Maybe for her, but not for you. It doesn't make it bad or good. It depends on the individual. So the concept of teaching your client and getting them to follow strict cues
Mm.
without understanding what's going on. Yes, maybe you can start guiding someone who needs a little extra guidance, and that's fine. But where do you go with that? Because if the client is dependent on your instruction to move, then their benefit or their exercise is dependent on your 1 hour or whatever 50-minute session. But our goal, at least I feel for many instructors that I've spoken to, is to help the client move better in their everyday life. And
Yes.
this is where sometimes clients that really like, oh, but does this feel okay? Oh, is this right? Oh, but how should my breath be? How should this be? And as much as I explain, I need them to start telling me what they're feeling. And I've had a moment where I had to stop a client and just sort of say, look, the reason why I ask all these questions to try, not to try so much to understand where you feel or what you're doing, because I can see what you're doing. I can see how you're breathing, but get you to understand what you're doing, because when you leave today and you walk out of that session, I'm not going to be there telling you how to squat to pick a book up from the floor.
Mm.
I need you to know how your body feels in that movement, because even if we do something 100 times over and over again, the way your body performs adapts every time. So our bodies aren't like systems that work like robots. They're like fluid organic structures that every time that we move, they will fire up slightly differently. And that's normal. And we should embrace that. So instead of this concept of right, wrong, do this, move your arm here, breathe in there, is the fluidity of the movement, how it feels for your body. And it's okay to readjust that a little bit. And if I can give, I know I'm speaking a lot about this, but I just have such a great experience with two clients. One of them, we were doing the long stretch, or, you know, the plank on the reformer. And I would cue her the way my repertoire taught it, which was inhale on the push, exhale to return. But because of this constant, you know, empowering her body mentality that we had during her sessions, she turned to me and she's like, no, I'm going to exhale as I push out. And in that moment, it was such a great interaction for me. And I said, why? And she's like, because I feel a much stronger core and pelvic floor correction, and my back feels safer. And she was someone that I was training who had a lot of back pain. Like even the way that she would walk into the studio, you could see that she was in pain. So the concept was, instead of following my exact cues, she was able to get that connection for herself where she identified what worked for her body. And that was worth a million cues that I could have given her. because she knew where she stood. And that was very empowering for me as an instructor, knowing that she was now empowered to make a decision for her body. And I find that, at least for myself, that brings a lot more value than somebody coming and following A, B, C, D kind of instructions.
Yes, that is so true. And what a powerful example, because if you can try and teach your clients in a way that they are that connected to their body and they're developing that trust and that intuition of, hang on, this is what needs to happen when they are lifting something heavy or doing something awkward or just doing a workout outside of the studio, there's so much less chance of them overdoing it, because they're going to listen to their body instead of having to listen to what you're saying all the time and becoming too dependent on what you're saying. And I do feel like when I first started out as an instructor, it took a long time to get anything out of my mouth. Like, I was trying to tell them just to get into a plank, but I had a few sentences. So they'd be trying to get into position, but it took a while. And if you're in a group situation, it's even worse, because you end up having one person in a plank, but the rest are starting to get in the position, and that person's been in the plank for like a few seconds already. So trying to get quick cues is something that's really key. And having quick, clear instructions as an instructor. So practicing that is really key. It's something that I talk about in the Empowered Instructor, is that at the start of my journey as an instructor, after that experience of having someone in a plank for a while, I thought, okay, I got to change things. And I decided to pretend that I can't speak English. And what that means is using as few conjunctions as possible, and just like leg to ceiling, hands behind leg, or on all fours, slide one leg back, other leg follows. So there's no complete sentence, there's not much English, it's just the key words that you need in order to get your clients into position as quick as possible. Yeah.
I find exactly in a group class, that's important, because when you have, depending on the size of your group class and the emphasis of your group class, it can be very challenging, because you can have different levels. You can have someone that's even understands the way you talk versus somebody to whom your language is a little bit weird, or doesn't get your cues. And that's why you have some people in the same group class having the aha moments, and other people being confused by it. So absolutely. And I do the same. And I think actually what helps is when I teach French, in French, because I'm in the French speaking part of Switzerland, because French is not my first language, I actually get away with a lot of what you just said, where I can give very clear instructions of like arm up, leg down.
Yeah.
And that can be very efficient as well,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to move someone. I wouldn't say a faster, not compromising quality of movement, but just getting them there, just getting up so that maybe you can start a further explanation, or, before like you get into a plank, and then you connect, or, whatever your goal of that exercise is. But cueing matters a lot, because it's going to work for some people and it's not going to work for others. And also depends on private versus group. And I think that can be very challenging for a new instructor when it comes to a big group class. How do you get everyone to enjoy the session or the exercise? So I don't know, how do you feel about that? How would you advise people on your program to
Mm,
address, let's say, a group class of 6 to 8 people, which is
yeah.
quite a big one.
And
I think they get
that's
even bigger.
oh, it is so common nowadays to have a class of between 8 and 12 and sometimes more. I've even heard of some group Pilates sessions on reformers where it's on a TV and there's no instructor, which is quite interesting.
Okay.
But the way I would approach it is, if I'm teaching the group for the very first time, start with things that can't go very wrong. So you don't want to be doing any balance work right at the start of the session. Do things
Right.
where there's enough body connection on the reformer, for instance, or on the mat, and starting with breath work, starting to read which clients are a little bit more confident and could become the leader. So then in some group sessions, there's always probably around 2 or 3, maybe just 2,
Mhm.
but keeping an eye on those people and stepping a little bit further away from them, ensuring that you are closer to the people that are really not confident in what they're doing and are looking around. Go stand near those people. And so just doing breath work or balance work or leg lifts or just a gentle flow, you can start to narrow down who the people are that you don't have to go too close to. Not that you're not going to help them, but just at the very start, while clients are still getting used to your style, because we
Mhm.
all teach so differently. And if they can start to get used to your instructions, like me, for instance, I'm from South Africa and teaching in Australia. Sometimes I'll say things and clients are like, what? Because they just heard a different word in that
Yeah.
like I didn't say that word, but it sounds like a different word in my accent. And just getting people used to your style is really key. So starting with the
Mhm.
basics, slowly building on that. We don't have to give a very hard class or a very complicated one.
Yeah.
If you just choose really basic exercises and start to build on those, challenge with
Mhm.
those, then at least they're still getting a good challenge.
Yeah. No, it's true. And you learn by doing a lot, I feel. When I first started, like you mentioned earlier, when you were a newbie instructor, the cues were much more basic. But you learn with time, right? Sometimes you will try the most bizarre cue that you think, oh, this will never work, and it'll just have like the biggest impact. But until you try, you won't know. So for me, I've said probably a lot of also very silly things during classes, and I've had people actually like giggle at some of the things I have said, because I'll ask them to find maximum and then find that kind of calm their breath, and they're like, what do you mean maximum effort and then calm your breath? But it's because I'm trying to get someone out of like a fight or flight response
Yes.
during an exercise where I don't think it's at all necessary.
Yeah.
So but some people will be like, oh, okay, and others will be like, no, but I'm working really hard, how can I calm my breath? So you try, you learn as you go along. And we touched on this in the previous conversation. It also depends who you are as an instructor.
Mm,
And I think you have to stay a bit true to that. I
mm,
really like that conversation that we had, because if you are somebody who's focusing a little bit more, maybe like rehabilitative work, or really more of like restorative movement or mindfulness in the practice versus fitness, your cues will be different as an instructor.
mm.
And sometimes it's okay not to have to just completely change for a client, because you're going to do a disservice if you're going to try and be somebody else. Right.
Yeah.
So if at least that's in my opinion, if I have somebody who comes in and maybe they're looking for something more fitnessy, and I know we can have a nice harder class, but because I know as an instructor my goal is to empower them versus make them sweat and walk out of here limping because they've had like the coolest reformer workout. Yes, my cues are going to be different, and at times I'm okay to maybe lose a client or even recommend a client to another studio that I know is a little bit more for what they're looking for, knowing that I don't have to entirely change myself, because there is no, right or wrong. Like there's no like bad or good movement. Like there is something for somebody. And sometimes you will realize that, okay, this is the way that I want to teach. I want to go slower because I feel like this is where most of the value where I can give. And it's okay to stay that way. And it's okay that not everyone is going to love the way you teach, the way you cue. It shouldn't throw you off as an instructor too much.
Yeah.
Because you know what your style is and who you're there for and the value that you add, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's really important to just approach the person in front of you and not just look at the workout. And I loved what you said before we met up, before we pressed record. There was molding the workout to the client, not molding the client to the workout. And those words are just, it is such a good way of approaching every session. Is, yes, have a workout that will be great, but then look at the clients as well, and just tweaking it in a way that you're approaching it in a safe way, in an exciting way for that client, in a way that will resonate with them. If you're teaching men, for instance, men love to burn. They also really want to be pushed. They want some exercises that they know. Even if they aren't the style you're teaching, just add them. Just anything that will, whether they're jumping or doing push-ups or having something tailored in there, meeting the clients and molding the workout towards them is so important, especially because when we qualify as instructors, we know the workouts. We like, okay, all right, it's going to be these exercises and nothing else. and you just try your best to get through it all. But yeah, just slowing it down, not to a point where they're not having a workout. You can always push your client. It's fun. But meeting the clients where they're at.
I find this to be really a very important conversation for instructors, because we learn a repertoire in the Pilates world. We learn a repertoire, we teach the repertoire, or at least that's how we start. And you have some that will stick to the repertoire, one exercise after the other, and that's the flow of it. And I was like that in the beginning, or I would come into a group class or even a private class with an idea of what I wanted for the client, because I have a file, like I will look at their notes. So I'm prepared for every client that walks in, and I'll have a set of things that I want to cover in that class. And then they come in, and my first thing is, how are you doing? Like, how's the body feeling? How are you feeling? Because if they come in, they're like, oh, I fell yesterday and I have like pain in my shoulder, I know if my program might have to do a 360, might have to change entirely. Or I have a client, and I've had this with clients that have come in, and they're so stressed from the day that I just know that the workout that I had is not gonna fit them. So you have to like do a 360 in terms of how you approach them, rather than saying, okay, well, let's get into footwork, or if you're starting on the mat, let's get into 100. Maybe we don't start there. Maybe that's not the exercise that we're going to do at all in the session. And you have to be able to readjust and adapt the workout to the person in front of you. And even the cues, even the tone of your voice. And that can sound funny, but I've actually had a client tell me that they like this about me, and I didn't notice it. And now I start to notice it more and more when I watch other instructors or when I see other instructors, is the cue in which you, the tone of voice that you use when cueing. Do you try and calm someone with slower, more gentle words and more deeper breaths as you take them through the exercise? Or like, do you pick up the pace and say, okay, 5 more seconds, you can do this, great work. So
Yeah.
how you structure the class
Yes.
has to change, has to be adapted. Maybe you learn to cue, reach the arm up while pulling, I don't know, the shoulder down, or I think that's a terrible cue, so that was a bad example, but let's give it. Versus, imagine you're reaching for, I don't know, your winter clothes at the top of your wardrobe at the end of summer. And you can see, and something that, if I instruct someone to do this versus if I tell them like an everyday cue and I see how their body moves, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, like they're saying they have all this back pain, but we're at a time that they're probably doing a lot of reaching, picking, changing things in their, everyday life, rearranging their wardrobe or their home. And I see how every time they lift their arm, their lower back is like trying to help and they're putting a lot of pressure. I know right away that whatever I had planned for that session needs to adapt to improving some shoulder flexion, strengthening the shoulder, getting the ribs to go a little bit in, and getting them into exercises that is going to be relevant based on the pain that they described. And this is trial and error, because no newbie instructor is going to know exactly what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. But you have to try and learn as an instructor. And with time, this will, I guess, get better, or you'll get a lot more confident, because sometimes we leave a session even thinking like, oh, that wasn't the right exercise. And I still have that where I'll be like, oh, I should have given them that other exercise. And that's okay. Like, it's going to be a trial and error. But unless you're actually going through the trial and error versus being like, okay, but that's the repertoire, so we're going to stick to this after exercise, but after this exercise. Like, for me personally, at least, I think that adaptation needs to happen. The concept of right movement versus wrong movement needs to stop. And even, myself not being from the classical Pilates world, and maybe some people won't like me saying this, but, sometimes the order of the repertoire doesn't make sense for me, and I will do it differently entirely.
Yeah. It depends on the client.
Yeah.
And we really need to, yes, there's the classical, like I'm qualified in the classical as well as the clinical, but it's important to mold it towards what they need. And I love that, like the power of words and using an everyday life thing that they would be doing will help you so much more in, firstly, knowing what they do and how they reach for things, but also helping them to reach for things differently.
Yeah.
And it sometimes triggers a feeling that they get in their everyday life and they go, oh yeah, every time I'm reaching for something in that kitchen cupboard, my shoulder just starts cramping, and it's something that's been bugging them. But because you've brought up their daily life, that is what's brought up that memory. And just using things that you don't have to use fancy language. Using daily life in your classes is so magic and so transformational, because you will be making a difference outside of class. You will be on their mind outside of class too.
Yeah.
And it's the simple instructions that are going to change people's lives in those scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. And when we're looking at like real life examples, and then we talked earlier about how we or myself, I would like the person to connect into the exercise. It gets them to leave, and that's what I mentioned earlier. It's what we do in our session, but so much of what we do in our session needs to translate to what you do in your everyday life. And I'll tell things to clients like, okay, if I see you once or twice a week versus what you do, 8 to 12 hours in front of your screen the whole day. I'm competing, like it's almost a losing battle for
Yeah.
me. So unless I can teach you how to move better outside of our 55-minute session, I'm really not adding that much value. Because yes, you can come break some sweat, but I mean, that shouldn't be the goal, at least in my classes. It should be more, we have to have a deeper goal than just trying to, break some sweat. But when you leave, when you sit and you sit at your desk and your neck starts to hurt, like, how are you sitting? How are your
Yes.
shoulders? How do you get out of that? How do you know what's right or wrong? Is there a right or wrong? I have clients that have, they have quite a lot of forward head, and they can't get, how we're taught to assess the plumb line, ear over shoulder. That's not the best way for them to address it. By putting the ear over shoulder, they may be overarching their lower back and putting pressure on their low back. How many times I see people like get into like, oh yeah, I'm like this, and then I'll sit like this. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is awful. What are you doing to, like, I don't say it like that, but in my head, I'm like, this is
Yeah.
awful. Because they were maybe taught, ear on top of shoulder. But how does that translate into how your back is? Maybe you need to be a little bit more forward because you need to adapt to your body. Maybe you need to adapt to your body that particular day. So do you know where your body feels okay? Have you taught your client to help themselves? Have you empowered them? Or have you made them dependent on you? And that's why I think that powerful cueing that needs to translate into the everyday life is so important. Again, depending on how you want to be as an instructor, but at least in the way that I train, it's so important that they can leave and be better for themselves and be like, okay, I don't need Mila, 8 to 10 hours when I work, because I actually now know enough and I can do things without her. And I find that so much more valuable than if someone's completely dependent on me. Because you might think, oh, that's great for business, but at the end of the day, if it's not great for the person in front of you, it's not worth my time. So I would rather add value in that sense, and get someone feeling better so that maybe they can tell more people and I can help more people, versus like, securing a client, say, oh, that really works for them, I will just like cue it that way, and getting that person to be more dependent on you. And I've seen that, with instructors as well. And it's something I don't personally respect when I see, but yeah, some people do that too.
Yeah. Yes. It's more powerful being able to allow the clients to feel empowered. So, yeah, to the instructors out there, I hope that this helps you, that maybe taking a look at the power of your words and your cues and how you are empowering your clients, or are they really dependent? And are you molding the workout to the client, or the client to the workout? And just approaching your teaching maybe in a new way, or understanding why your sessions are great. So yeah, thanks for listening, and Mila, thank you for joining. We will be having part 3 next time, where we'll be discussing the online workouts and the online courses, and the difference between the ones that are really successful and helpful and the ones that just are not suggested, and things to look out for. So yeah, join us for part 3. Thank you, Mila.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Claudia. I'm really looking forward to our next discussion. I have some great examples to share, and I think we'll have a really interesting conversation.
Yay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.